went to 124 straight meetings and videotaped them, all right? AU was given all of those videotapes. It must have been remarkable. I talked to one of our lawyers, and she says, yeah, it was trying to go through 120 city council meetings, you know, town board meetings. But yes, they were there. 2/3 of the prayers were overtly, big time, excessively sectarian. Another third were like, okay, not quite so bad. Hardly non-sectarian because they were invoking Jesus and stuff like that. But they weren't quite so pointed as the others were. All right? Can you imagine that? Could you imagine sitting through 120 of those, Arlene? Oh, by the way, 120 of them were Christian. 4 of them, of the 120, 2 were done by rabbis. Okay, and I'll tell you why the rabbis got involved. One was done by a Buddhist. Now, I don't know if he was a lama or she was a lama or not or whatever, or a teacher at a learning center. And the last one was a Wiccan. And the Wiccan priestess was praying, she was praying to Apollo and Athena. All right? After she did hers, the town said, forget this action. We're going back to the Christian prayers. Okay. This is in 2007. 2008, or shortly after all of this, AU was contacted and brought in. AU wrote a letter asking the board to either stop prayers completely or choose invocations that are non-sectarian. All right? Remember, we're operating under Marsh at this point, which allows this. Instead, the city opens up for the first time to the chaplain of the month to non-Christians, like I said. Okay? They did this because they figured, well, all right, but we can bypass the law by throwing a few, you know, Jews in there, and that'll be the end of it. Okay? It would have been very insulting if I was a rabbi, extremely so, being used in this fashion. They also contacted, the town did, the Alliance for Defending Freedom, or ADF, and asked them to represent them in this case. How many of you are familiar with the ADF? Oh, these guys are amazing. This is a legal firm that represents in church-state issues. They represent on behalf of Jesus, okay? They are funded by the televangelists, guys like Robertson and Falwell's Kid and all that kind of thing. They're incredibly well financed, very, very big, very, very rich, and extremely influential in some communities. Our law firm in Michigan, how many are familiar with the Thomas More Legal Center? Thomas More Legal Center here in Ann Arbor are much like that, but they take on primarily Catholic-oriented cases, okay? But these guys represent evangelicals whenever their religious freedom is being threatened. They're there, they're front and center, and they're merciless. I mean, really, I've had one dealing with them, and I mean, they did everything this side of threatened to castrate me. I mean, they were really hardcore. All right, AU then attempts an out-of-court settlement with ADF. They, of course, said no. They wanted to take this to court. 2010, the case is heard. The U.S. District Court rules in favor of the board, the favor of the town of Greece. Greece won. District Judge Charles J. Siragusa, not a particularly good Catholic boy, I might add, he said, I acknowledge that the vast majority of the prayers were offered by Christian clergy and that many of them contained references to Jesus Christ. So he acknowledges right up front that they were in direct violation of Marsh. He admits it. There's no question about it, no hesitation. He had all the videotapes. He looked at them all. Okay? Then he says, in typical fashion, but the invocations do not advance one faith or disparage another faith or belief. So therefore, it's okay. Okay? He found no proof that the town intentionally excluded non-Christians, even though the process, the infrastructure that the city had set up to get these preachers in to do the prayers was well known to the court. He knew all about it. Okay? But he said no. He denied, literally denied the facts that were in front of him because they wanted to maintain this practice. All right, AU then appealed, of course. In 2011, the case is heard. Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals rules now in favor of the plaintiffs. Yay. Okay. Judge Guido Calabrese, a very good Catholic boy, writing for the appellate panel, said, The town's procedures virtually ensured a Christian viewpoint because nearly all of the prayers were delivered by Christian clergy. The town violated the First Amendment by presenting a steady drumbeat of often specifically sectarian Christian prayers. We conclude that an objective, reasonable person would believe that the town's prayer practice had the effect of affiliating the town with Christianity. The phrase objective, reasonable person is part of Lemon. So he relied a little bit on the Lemon case, okay, in order to make his ruling. That was the big thing there. And that a legislative prayer practice viewed in its entirety may not advance a single religious sect as it does in Greece. Okay? So he ruled. Nice ruling, end of story, we can all go home. No. ADF appealed to the Supreme Court. And remarkably, the Supreme Court decided to hear it. Okay? Why do I say remarkably? It's because the Supreme Court hates church-state issues. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to go near it. Okay? They've made that clear in the past. Matter of fact, you can go through the entire federal system, they don't want to hear about it. The reasons are obvious. One, all of the previous reasons are, okay, permissive, way too open for interpretation. Therefore, guy opts for one interpretation, he'll get overridden in appeal. All right? It's not the kind of thing they want to go for. Also, too, and this is key, this is the big one, is that they're very unpopular across the board. All right? Even people who are supporters of church-state separation in spirit, they hate when these things come up because they sound so nickel and dimey. They don't realize that this is a wall, a brick in the wall, and if these bricks are removed, the wall falls down. They don't want to think about that. They don't want to go there. So they are extremely unpopular rulings, okay? But the Supreme Court took it anyway, which in itself is interesting. That brings us to the hearing. Now, AU's core argument, this is basically what we did. Please listen carefully because it's a little different than you might expect. Local government isn't like Congress or even state legislators. Right up front they said, listen, local government, commission meetings, city councils, county councils, whatever, okay, they're not like legislative sessions in state level or federal. Marsh dealt with legislative sessions, okay? They say many citizens have no choice but to attend local government meetings when they are seeking board action on community issues, taking an oath of office, receiving public honors, or requesting a variance of or some additional consideration from the board. So in other words, we stated right up front, these things are different than Congress. They do a lot more. They are very frontline. They are very almost intimate in a way because you're talking with a guy you just elected to take care of a problem that's happening next door, literally sometimes next door, okay? They said, and because the also, children are often required to attend meetings as part of their public educations. Kids are made to go there as part of their education. I taught social studies. I used to give extra credit if they go. All right, so I can contest to this, and it's true. Every single meeting I've gone to, there's been a kid. He could be a kid who was an Eagle Scout getting a special acknowledgement, or he could be just a kid sitting there because he just flunked his last test and he wants to bail himself out by going to a city council meeting. Okay? But kids are there. Next, and because the attendance for these meetings is often small, everyone can see who participates and who does not. So anyone who comes to a government board wanting some sort of assistance could reasonably feel pressured to participate in the invocation simply to get in the board's good graces. Okay, and that's a fact. How many of you have ever gone to a council meeting to get something? Anybody? Okay, I have too, all right? And believe me, those guys up there, they can decide this for you right there on the spot. I want this real bad, okay? They can do it. It's within their power to make this decision for me. I'm certainly not going to do anything to screw that up, especially if it means enough to me, right? So I might feel coerced. See, coercion is the key. I might feel coerced to stand up, bow my head, pray like everybody else, just so I don't get cut off at the knees, even before I open my mouth and represent the values of my case. Okay? That's what AU said. Twofold. One, council meetings like this, town board meetings, are not like legislative sessions. They're different, a whole new animal, because a bunch of stuff happens there. And two, coercion is possible there, whereas coercion, if you go to a state legislative session or federal, isn't. Okay? I'm an anonymous face in the crowd whenever I go to these meetings. Okay, we see the distinctive difference? Okay. This would not be the way I'd go, but this is the way AU took it. Now, the ADF's core argument is real simple. They say it is a tradition for government to solemnize meetings with an open prayer, with an opening prayer, and freedom of religion dictates that courts don't have the right to regulate the content of prayers. They would recognize that courts have the power to regulate speech, okay? But they say they don't have the right to regulate prayers under any circumstance. In other words, they believe that even marsh is too restrictive for them. You get that? They're basically saying we have the right to do whatever we want, and because people have been doing it from day one. The best way to talk about court hearings, I think, at least with the Supremes, is to go through some notable quotes, okay? What they're saying, the questions they're asking, the statements they make. The first quote I included was one from Kagan, traditionally a supporter of church-state separation. She's asking the ADF lawyer, okay? She's asking the town's lawyer. She says, suppose that as we began this session of the court, the Chief Justice had called a minister up to the front of the courtroom, and the minister had asked everyone to stand and to bow their heads in prayer, and the minister said the following: we acknowledge the saving sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross. We draw strength from his resurrection. Blessed are you who has raised up the Lord Jesus, and who will raise us in our turn and put us by his side. Then the members of the court who had stood responded, amen, and made a sign of the cross. And then the Chief Justice called your case. Would that be permissible? Well, she's asking, and the guy says, I don't think so, Your Honor. Now, why is this significant? The prayer she gave him was one of the many prayers that was given in Greece. Word for word, she took it right off the videotape. So she sets him up right from the get-go. And right from the get-go, the guy says, no, that wouldn't be permissible. This kind of gives you a rough idea of the quality of the ADF attorney. They might be vicious, but they're not so smart. Okay? Not so smart. Next quote, Sotomayor. Now, Sotomayor is talking now, and this is really a heartbreaker. She's talking to a member of the Attorney General's office. Obama sided with the town. Yeah, he sided with the town. We'll get into why he did, I think. I'm going to speculate in a minute. But she's asking his Obama's representative. She says, so why do you think that someone who is sitting in a small room where hearings of this nature are being held, when the guy who's the chairman of this legislative body is about to rule on an application you're bringing to him or her, why do you think any of those people, say non-believers, would feel coerced to stand? And you know what? He had no answer. He said, we'll defer that till later on, Your Honor. He couldn't. He could not defend himself. All right, let's get to this. Why do you think Obama is siding with the town? Anyone speculate? This is my guess. Pardon? Yeah, in part, political. He knows. Yeah, he knows that if AU were to win this case, he knows, pardon the expression, a storm would happen. A major political storm, without question. He also knows that not a single politician, Democrat or Republican, would defend the court's ruling. He knows that. Okay, he just knows it. And that the storm would be so intense that it would distract everything. That would dominate Fox for months probably, or at least a couple of months, talk radio indefinitely. And it would bring in millions of dollars into Christian right organizations. Okay? It's a political hot potato. So he can avoid the political hot potato by supporting Greece. And since Greece has such a weak case, okay, the court will probably come up with some creative way that everybody wins, so to speak. I think it's a very cowardly act. I'm going to politicize for a minute. He shouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have gotten involved. They shouldn't have written the brief. They don't have to. Okay, they don't have to. But why they did was purely political, I believe. Ginsburg says, she says, referring to town boards, she says, it's not simply a legislature. It has a number of administrative functions. Sometimes it convenes a town meeting, sometimes it entertains zoning application, sometimes, and then she gets interrupted by Alito, who says, it clearly is a legislative body. Okay. It was almost petulant. He was described as being petulant. The only difference is it's a town rather than Congress or a state legislature where you have more formalized procedures. So there. I mean, effectively, he didn't say the so there, that's me. But effectively, that's the tone. That's what he was all about, you know. He had no legal information to offer. It was just a gut reaction, a gut feeling, okay. Now let's get to the big gun. Let's get to Scalia, okay. Thomas obviously said nothing. You know, you know that, he says nothing, okay. Let's get to Scalia. They, and he's referring to the prayer leaders, they are there as citizens. And these people perhaps invoke their deity at meals. Norm, what does that mean? What's that all about? Does that seem to fit? No, okay. No, it's a non sequitur, yeah. Get this. This is where it gets even more fun. He says, they should not be able to invoke it before they undertake a serious governmental task, such as enacting laws or ordinances. See, now he thinks the prayer givers enact laws and ordinances. They have nothing to do with it. They just open the meeting. Scalia's not stupid, okay? Why is he talking so foolishly? It's because he has nothing else to say. He has nothing else to offer. The case is ironclad. They violated the law through basis by Marsh, by giving sectarian prayers, the whole 9 yards. They had the videotape. Scalia's probably looked at the videotape for maybe 30 seconds, but he looked at it anyway. He knows, okay? Weird. Scalia again says something makes a little more sense, this time again to the ADF. He says, what is the equivalent of legislative prayer for somebody who is not religious? ADF's attorney says, it would be an invocation of guidance and wisdom, but he didn't know to whom it would be directed to. Right. He's not going to acknowledge that's being directed to the generic God. He won't do that. Because there is no such thing as the generic God. There is only the Christian God, and everybody else is a myth. Or worse, okay? He won't even admit it. But he does bring to mind an interesting question. Okay? When you are doing a non-sectarian prayer, who are you addressing it to? Atheists would say, nobody, the ether, okay? Nobody at all. There's no spiritual being on the other end of this prayer. Most religious people would say, it's not even worth doing the prayer. My brother's a priest, Episcopalian priest. He says it's not even worth doing it because it has no passion. There's nothing to it. It's all sanitized. It's all cleaned of everything that could be considered meaningful to the listeners. Okay? So it does bring up the question, which is worth pondering. Let's keep that up here too. All right, now the boss talks. This is Roberts. And Roberts is now talking to, again, the attorney for ADF. By the way, the court asked very few questions of the AU attorneys. It's not because they didn't want to hear from them. It's because they had already done the job. They had presented such a locked case. They're really quite proud of themselves for their work on this one. Here we go. Robert says, I wonder how far you can carry your historical arguments. In other words, the history doesn't make it clear that particular practice is okay going into the future. In other words, just because we've been doing it doesn't necessarily mean we have to do it in the future. That's the argument. He's asking this question. He's literally begging the ADF to come up with a case other than that. Please tell me something. Give me another reason, why you're just and righteous in this particular move. Okay? They had no response other than to repeat because they did it since 1792. End of story. Nothing else. They gave the conservatives nothing through the course of this thing. Breyer. Okay, Breyer they're considered more pragmatic than most of them. Okay? Liberal. He's talking to the ADF guy. He says, listen, do you have any objection to publicizing that non-religious people are welcome to come after the prayer? Are you willing to use a website maybe? Or if all that were left in case were the question of making a good felt effort to try to include others, would you object to doing it? In other words, he's saying, listen, would you, if you publicized it, so the rabbi could volunteer and Wiccan could volunteer and Norm could volunteer, to talk about circumcision, if all this kind of stuff, would you be willing to do that, like on a website or maybe run a little article in the paper or something like that? He says, no, we wouldn't be willing to do that. He wouldn't be willing to do that because he didn't believe the town was obligated to do so. So here's Breyer, traditionally one of our friends, trying to help these guys, trying to effectively say, would you please give me something, give us something to talk about. Okay? No, he has nothing to talk about. Now here comes Kennedy. For those of you that like the court, I like to follow the court because it's kind of fun. But Kennedy is often the swing vote. Okay? Right now we have 4 liberals, we have 4 conservatives. Well, we have 4 whack jobs. No. Well, 3 whack jobs. No, 2 whack jobs, and then Scalia and his Clarence. Okay, we have that. All right, and they're entirely different ball game right there. And then you have 4 liberals who pretty much are cool. Then you got Kennedy. Kennedy rules either way. All right, nobody can figure out why Kennedy rules the way he does. He often volunteers, by the way, to write the majority or the minority report, but they never give him the job. Okay, it's not because he's dumb. It's just because he doesn't think the same way everyone else does. So it's difficult to pin him down. But I got 3 quotes for him because of that. First one says, Kennedy says, in a way, it sounds quite elitist to say, well now, we can do this, meaning pray before legislative sessions in Washington. We can do this in Sacramento. We can do this in Austin, Texas. But you're saying the people in Greece, they can't do that? That's an interesting question, all right? He's drawing in an argument about fairness. If we're going to do it in 2 places, why can't we do it in 3? But another way of looking at it is, maybe we can't do it in any, okay? Maybe that's the road we have to hoe. Maybe that's what we have to do to eliminate the elitist quality of it. Maybe we have to get rid of the whole program. Okay, it's possible with him. Next thing he says, he's talking again to the ADF, he says, your argument was essentially, we've always done it this way, and yes, that has some force to it. But it seems to me that your argument begins and ends there. So he definitively put a cap on it. Okay, there is some merit, the fact we've always done it, but not a lot of merit at all. And last, requiring prayers to be non-sectarian might involve the state very heavily in censorship and the approval or disapproval of prayers. I think that's the gist of the whole matter for the court. They do not want to create a ruling at all, under any circumstance, in which the judiciary's the responsibility would fall on the judiciary to determine what is non-sectarian and what is sectarian. Okay? Many judges during the course of this hearing said things like, yeah, I know a sectarian prayer when I hear it. I mean, they basically did. But they don't want to go there. They don't want to go there at all. Okay? They tried a little bit with Marsh. They tried a little bit with the Lemon Test to create some, I don't know, broad guidelines. But it looks to me and it looks to them like they're going to have to be more specific, and they don't want to go there. Okay? Now here's some other observations. Kennedy is, of course, the spring vote, like I said. Obama's Justice Department seems to be most concerned about the parsing of prayer by the federal courts and, of course, the political firestorm that could occur. And otherwise, they dislike Marsh, but they fear the alternative. Fear is the key word here. Other observations. The liberal branch considered the case a no-brainer. They couldn't even figure out why they were doing it. I mean, some of the questions and attitudes that they were sharing appeared to be, why are we even doing this? I mean, it's clear these guys are wrong, okay? The conservative branch had no legal arguments beyond what we've always done it this way to act upon. Okay, they weren't given anything to work with, even. And frankly, no one wanted to hear the case, as I've made it clear. Now, to wrap up real fast, what is it we want? Okay, what is it we want? The ideal, as far as I'm concerned, would be a decisive ruling that prohibits legislative prayer, period. Okay, it would overturn March, that is, but you know, that there'd be no more. It would just be gone. They wouldn't do it anymore. Believe me, a lot of governmental institutions have never had it, okay, and they've survived quite nicely. Thank you. So it would just be gone. They get rid of the problem on all the things attached to it by simply saying, that's it, we're done. It's been a nice run, but we're through, okay? But given the impossibility of defining what non-sectarian prayer, like I mentioned, it might be the viable choice because you cannot define it, because you don't want to create a situation where the courts are parsing them to make sure that they're on the up and up. You might just have to get rid of the whole thing, okay? That's one. The other one is a decisive ruling on whether or not town meetings are legislative meetings, okay? In other words, to have the court say, they're not legislative sessions. They're something entirely different, therefore Marsh does not apply to them. Okay? We either have to make up new rules for them, we'll do that down the road, or, okay, we'll do it right now. But they're basically going to draw the line, separate the two. Okay? Then no prayers, sectarian or non-sectarian, would be permitted on the local level, or maybe they would be under certain circumstances. This is AU's position. They took a much more pragmatic approach here, I think, feeling perhaps, not in their head, that they could not win the ultimate, okay, the total elimination of it. But they could win controls, meaningful controls on legislative prayer.